All right, this morning we are on part 10 of our series through the Gospel of Mark. So we are in chapter 2, and we're going to start with verse 18. We're taking 4 verses, Mark chapter 2, verses 18 through 22. And the subject today I know you're all excited about. We are talking about fasting. And a collective groan ensures, right? Fasting. Now, it's not a subject that gets a whole lot of teaching time or airtime, and it's not a subject that we can just fully embrace. I'm like, oh, I love doing this. And if you ever have practiced fasting, and some people actually do this really well, others really struggle with it. My metabolism has really slowed down, so it's an easier thing for me at this point, but it is out there. So what's the deal with fasting? Why do this? Why cause yourself pain or discomfort? And why not participate in something that you need to physically survive? Why is this a thing? And why is it recommended to us from Jesus? And when I was doing this study this week, I was convinced. And I was what's the word? Convinced that this is something that I need to employ more often. And Jesus in this passage tells us there's 3 reasons really why that we should participate in this and what it does for us and how it will help to change things, prepare for something else. So I want you to pay attention to this passage. Again, it's not something we're like, oh, I want to hear about this subject, right? At the end, I am convinced that you will be encouraged and enlightened, and hopefully you say, I'm going to use this tool, okay? Now, this past week, our daughter was up, of course, and we went up to Minnesota, and often when I go there, my mother-in-law, who lives by herself, she's in her 80s, has certain projects for me to do, like household things that you do. Well, the project this time was to swap out a sink in her bathroom, the faucets, that were, I'm serious, from the Stone Age, right? So they were like made out of stone. Not necessarily, but they've been there literally like 60 years, right? And weren't working, and it's like, hey, can you do this? And so I didn't bring the proper tools, and I, struggled and had to cut things, and I was like, oh, Lord, help me here. And it was a battle, right? But I'll tell you this, having the right tool makes all the difference, right? All the difference. A quick run to the hardware store, and bada bing, bada boom, right? We're moving because I purchased some tools that would make the job a lot easier. Fasting is a powerful tool that can, when employed, right, make a significant difference in our connectivity, let's say this, to the Lord, and in repairing things that have been torn or broken, and preparing us to receive something new. Okay, so it's a tool that is here at our disposal, a discipline, a way, a lifestyle choice in which some very powerful and significant things can occur because of our commitment to this, okay? So I'm going to put that out there as far as in the introduction. Now, as we know, I'm going to do some review, right? So we have to understand, okay, what's happening as Mark is telling the good news about Jesus Christ. The Gospels specifically are all about Christ, and really all of Scriptures point to, are built upon, and are founded in who Jesus was. So at this point in the Gospel of Mark, okay, we're seeing now the fame of Jesus continuing to spread. He was like the most famous person in all of the nation. He really couldn't go anywhere without people looking for him, wanting to be close to him, wanting to learn from him or receive from him. Now, he was drawing people to himself, and the news, again, had been all over. Now, the religious leaders, like the church officials, those who worked at the temple, all of that were becoming suspicious, were becoming jealous. Some did see him for who he was and committed themselves to following him. And so you'll see this building tension between what Jesus was doing and what the Pharisees or the scribes or the keepers of the law, they were escalating as well. And so last time we talked about, the paralytic. We talked about questions about who he was. We talked about these confrontations. And this passage comes in that series, and people were observing what Jesus and his disciples did in comparison to the religious leaders that they knew about, the priests, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and also, John the Baptist's followers. Now, all of these groups of people had a tradition in which they fasted on a regular basis, okay? And fasting in the Old Testament, if you look it up, you can do concordance search. It was given primarily in times of mourning, at times of repentance, to put on ashes and sackcloth, okay, and to fast and wail and to mourn, a time of repairing. But also there are places in which it indicates there's a time of connecting or preparing for what God would do. So this principle of fasting was there. And so the religious leaders took it to the next level, right? So they made it a religious obligation, and they made sure that when they fasted, and they fasted typically 2 days a week, but they wanted to make sure that everyone knew that they were fasting. So they would observe how pious they were and how righteous they were. So we tend to, and this happens in religion as well, take something that was good and powerful and meaningful and pervert it into something that's just way far away than what was originally intended. And so these folks had been doing that. And so Jesus then recalibrates what fasting was all about and reinitiates what it was designed to be and to do. So when we are at the end of this, again, hopefully you'll say, you know what, this is something that I will consider and I hope participate in it. Okay, so in this passage, there are three principal reasons why it is given to us to fast. And by the way, fasting means primarily to go without food. Right? Are you excited? Are you excited? You're excited, right? That's what it primarily means. Now, there's other ways to fast, okay, but this was given not going with food for a period of time for a set purpose. So we're going to talk about this, okay? So here we are, Mark chapter 2, starting in verse 18 through 20, and the title or the main point of this is Seeking God's Presence. This little point here, seeking God's presence is a primary motivation for one to participate in fasting, okay? So Mark 2, verse 18. Now, John's disciples, this is John the Baptist, right, who was going off of the scene. Now, John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. And people came and said to him, that's Jesus, why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples, they don't fast? And Jesus said to them, can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. All right, like what is he talking about here? All right, so the bridegroom, and in their wedding tradition in the day, when there was a wedding, there was at least a week-long feast. Okay, so there was a party. It just didn't happen one meal and some dancing and we all go home. No. This was a major event. Like people put vacation time in, they traveled, they prepared all of this delicious food, and it was a major focus point. And the expectation was, it's called the friends of the bridegroom. They would bring food, and they would bring the best that they had during that week to celebrate this momentous occasion of commitment in marriage. And so that was the tradition, that was the call. And so Jesus then pointed, and this is significant in a couple ways, he talked about the bridegroom, and he was actually talking about himself, right? Saying that I am the bridegroom, meaning that we, in Scripture, you'll see this language that we collectively are the bride of Christ, and Jesus is the groom, okay? And that kind of imagery is throughout Scripture, and if those who heard that, they would recognize what Jesus was saying. That's why the Pharisees were getting angry. It's like, is he saying that he's the groom? And of course he was. Now, Jesus then was saying, hey, listen, my disciples are not fasting at this time. The reason is that they are with me. So this is not the appropriate time for them to fast. We are together. This is the time of connectivity. This is the time of celebration. This is the time of, again, connection and with one another. This is not the proper time in which they are to fast, which means that there is a proper time and a proper place, and that time and place has to do with our relationship or connectivity to God, okay? And so he said, they're not fasting now because I'm here, right? Alarm bells. Whoa, what do you mean you're here? What are you saying? Yes, he was asserting his divinity again in this passage. But then he said, now, there's going to be a time when I'm taken away from them. I will not be physically present any longer. And then at that time, they will fast in that day. Now, fasting, again, had become a religious tradition and activity that had lost its original purpose. It was originally practiced as a means of seeking God and his presence. Now, Jesus, again, restored the original purpose by giving the illustration. We just talked about that, about wedding guests and the bridegroom and what would be an appropriate time to fast. Those who were fasting at the time had lost the original purpose. And again, it morphed into a way to impress people with how devoted and holy they were. The reason to fast, the reason to seek after God is to connect with him, not to impress other people. Jesus spoke, and he spoke against some of these practices in the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, lots of teaching there. And I'm going to bring to us Matthew chapter 6, verse 16 through 18, and saying this to folks then, and saying this to us now. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fast may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, right? Look good, right? That your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Good question for us all. Is our religious practice, do we do it to try to impress people or endeavor to be trying to connect with God? I often eat, imagine that, right? I often eat with people, right? My practice is to pray before I eat. Now, it's kind of funny, and being a pastor, you guys can't necessarily relate to that. People know that, And so when I often go out to eat with, say, family or friends, what have you, everyone makes sure that they pray. And sometimes I know that they're only praying because the pastor's with them. Right? Come on, let's just be honest. And I know, I'm not stupid, right? It's like, oh, they must pray all the time. It's like kind of awkward. It's like, oh, what do I do? Oh, I'm supposed to pray. Oh, will you pray? Or oh, I'll pray, right? This happens at family functions often. It's kind of funny and sad all at the same time. So here's the question. Why are they praying? Are they praying because I'm there to try to make an appearance that they're spiritual or that they do this? Or do you pray so that you connect with God? If the only time that you pray is in a public setting, that's a problem. For instance, if I, as your pastor, I only pray on Sunday morning when you're all here, but when you all aren't here, I never pray, you should leave, right? That's a problem. So I want to ask you and ask yourself, when are you doing your religious, what's the word? Practice. That's probably the best word. Do you read the Bible when your children are looking and that's it, and kind of pull it out of the shelf and put it there? Or are you truly seeking God for connection with God? And if people observe it, then they observe it. Not that that's a bad thing, right? It's not bad to pray in public. It's not bad to fast. These are actually really, really good things. But the question is, what's the motive? Jesus did not condemn these people for fasting. He called them hypocrites because they were only trying to impress people but not connect with God. They said they're hypocrites. He didn't say, well, you shouldn't do this. He says, but when you do this, look for your reward from God versus getting, quote unquote, rewarded from people. He says, well, the hypocrites do this, and they've received their reward. People say, wow, they are holy. Look at them. And that's all they're going to get. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to be rewarded, I'd rather be rewarded by God, right? You're important, but you're not that important, right? Good point, Jesus. So he says, when you're fasting, right? Don't make a sign, hey, I'm fasting, right? There are times in which I do fast, and I'm with somebody, and then we're eating lunch, right? And they ask me, why aren't you eating? Is it okay to say that you're fasting? Yes, right? No one's going to be like, I can't tell you, right? Hey, whatever, however you say that, it's okay. But if you're fasting and you want to make sure that you set your calendar up, with a breakfast meeting and a lunch meeting and then a dinner meeting, and so you will go, oh, I'm not feeling so good today because I'm fasting. Please pray for me because it's so hard. That's not what he's talking about. When you fast, well, why? So that the Father who sees in secret will reward you. Are you in your spirituality more focused in on the temporal changes or on the eternal benefits? Why are you a Christian? Why do you come to church? Why do you practice Christian disciplines? Why? Is it because you love God? Or is it you're trying to impress people? Christianity, I believe, has been done a great disservice and received great damage because of people who practice godly things without a godly heart. Looks good, but it does damage because people can read if someone is genuine or not. So why fast? One, to be in and with God's presence. We desire to connect. We desire to be with. We desire a reward from God. Now, wait a second. If you pray, does God hear you? Thank you. Absolutely, He does. Have you ever felt kind of disconnected with God? I love the honesty. I have too. Don't be like freaked out, like, I'm so unholy. There are times in which it seems that God's presence is hard to find. Now, were there times in the Old Testament and the New Testament in which people pursue God? Absolutely. Now, is there a place in which God isn't? No, there's not. However, there are times of testing and trying that God is present, but He doesn't seem to be interacting. And so then, do you now desire the presence to be with the bridegroom more than things that are even essential to your life? At those times, fasting is a way to break into, in a new way, God's presence. Now, some of you have done this, and probably most of us haven't even tried this. Why? Because who wants to do that? I love tacos. But there are times in which it's significant saying that God, your presence, my connectivity to you is greater than my desire for food, my own pleasure, my own desires. God, I desire this more than this. And God, if I give up this so that I can focus in on my connectivity to you, I will do so because you are more important to me than anything that is physically present here today. That's a significant statement. Now, fasting has become in vogue these days, right? If you look at diet things, they call it intermittent fasting. Say, man, these are all the benefits. Are there physical benefits? Sure there is. But fasting is not a diet program, right? It's not a way to kind of control and control and contain, we'll use that word, right? Appetite. It's a way in which we set things aside and say, I want something greater. And God, I desire your presence more than pizza, right? God, I desire to be with you more than anything here. God, this is my desire. I feel away, I feel alone, I feel disconnected, and even if you feel connected. It's a way to express devotion and desire to God. Noting that when God's presence is with you, there's a change, right? How do I describe that? There's it's hard to describe, a sense of connectivity, a sense of heightened emotions, it's a sense of peace or confidence or clarity or contentment. Okay? And I want you more than anything else. And you're feeling like, no, your spiritual life is just like tanked or like plateaued or just kind of blah. I'm reading my Bible and it's just like, right? Come on, let's be honest, right? We're not trying to make things super spiritual, right? Let's be honest, right? You're like, and you're feeling like you're struggling with sin and temptation, and you're just kind of struggling loving your spouse. And, it is time for a reconnect that will express itself in what you do. And fasting is a tool in which we forsake temporal things for a greater desire. And God will respond to you. To promise. To promise. God will reward you. He sees you. If you are genuinely looking to connect with God, and you're doing so not to try to be rewarded by people, even though people may notice, that's not your intent. Your intent is, God, I want to connect with you. The promise is He will reward you. Conditional promise. If you do this, then this will happen every time. Now, what does that reward look like? I don't know. I know it has to do with His presence and His connectivity, right? So Jesus says, when I am gone, this then will be a time in which we are, it should be done. The longing for something greater. Now, again, when you fast, and hopefully you'll think about this, and again, I understand diabetes, I understand some food restriction, I understand that. You may need to look at some of those things. But if you're saying, God, I want you more than this stuff, I can give up something else, right? It's not just like skipping your favorite food, it's about seeking God. Right? If you're fasting, then you take now that time it would have been to prepare food. Our anticipation of food, right? You guys ever, that, at home I got some steaks, right? And you're sitting here in church or wherever, and you're thinking about, I love my steaks. Well, he stopped talking so I can get my steaks, right? I get it, right? I love steak, right? I do. I think it's great. But now, instead of longing for that, we long for God's presence. And so we're taking that time and saying, God, I want you more. Right? And some of it's just practical, right? It takes you a while to cook your food, right? I love microwaves, right? But it takes some time. And now, if you ever fasted, you know that your stomach's like, hey, I'm still here, people. Are you going to feed me, right? It starts doing its thing, and that reminds me, David, you need to pray, right? What do you want more here? It's a helpful reminder. We'll talk about some of the practical stuff. No, it's not. Is it really this time? On my first point. My wife's up there. No, she's funny. Okay. First point. Seeking God's presence. Okay. Moving on. Now, Jesus then, and this is all in, you can read, all these verses are connected in this section, right? Here's another reason. Repairing something torn. He goes on after he talks about the bride and the bridegroom, and then he says this: no one sews a piece of unshrunken cloth on an old garment. If he does, the patch tears away from it, and the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. All right, what is he talking about? So he's using an illustration that they, that time, really understood, and we hopefully will understand it as well. Now, typically, we don't repair much of our clothes. If we get a tear in it, what do? Throw it away, right? Back in the day, clothing was very valuable, right? It wasn't like, you can go down to the mall and pick up a new outfit, right? This was handmade. Clothing was precious. You take care of it. And if you had something that was torn somehow, you would take the time to mend it. So he's using this illustration to say you have a garment and it was torn, okay? And they knew that you couldn't take a new piece of cloth, right? Something that was brand new. If you took this piece of cloth, say you had a hole, right? And you took a piece of cloth and you sewed it around, and then it was washed, okay? Cloth shrinks, right? At least back then, and today now it does as well. So you can imagine putting that on there, and all of a sudden the outfit gets washed, and what you wanted to make better got worse. Now, here is the practical application. We can use fasting to repair something that is torn. Now, when I say something that's torn, it could be that you have a torn, broken relationship with a spouse. And it could have been just like getting holes in your pants, right? Sometimes I get holes in my knees because I've just worn it out, right? And just because of familiarity, of overuse, right? It's just been ripped. Sometimes there's a violent event in which it rips the fabric of your heart or your soul or relationship. I have caught my jeans on lots of different things. It's an event that happens, just rips a hole. Now, relationally, this can happen, right? Where we rip a hole in our fabric of our soul or in relationships. It could be a betrayal. It could be an affair. It could be a hurtful word or an abusive situation or some type of impropriety that's just torn our soul and torn our relationship. Something that was once whole and beautiful and precious and regarded as valuable has been torn. This happens. And there may be things that come to mind right now that you feel like have been hurt and need a repair and you want to fix it. And you may have tried to fix it in your own strength. And you try to patch it up and try to put it together. And then you realize your patch made it worse and not better. Has this ever happened to you? It's happened to me. It's happened to me lots. Trying to fix this hole in our relationship with my children or with my wife. And I know it's been ripped because I was rude or angry or unfaithful or stupid or whatever it is. Right? Try to fix it up, and then the patch makes it worse, and I got a gaping hole, and I don't know what to do. Why did it go south? Because I wasn't prepared. I hadn't shrunken myself, so to speak. I haven't humbled myself. I haven't approached it in a way that will be effective. There are things that only can be repaired inside of you and in relationships that require more than you have to give. You don't need more to fix that. You need less. Fasting prepares us, right? The unshrunken cloth. So you have to take care of that, prepare first in order for there to be a repairing of something that was ripped or worn out or torn. And I guess if I had a microphone and I went around here, you have anything in your life that got a hole in it? You know that's ripped? Any relationship, you have something? I do. For sure. Why hasn't it been repaired? And by the way, when there's a tear in your outfit, you're exposed, right? One, it could be embarrassing. Two, things are drawn attention to it, right? Your tear may be you get angry like all the time. It's kind of a tear in your soul, so to speak. And people know it. And you can be just fine. Most of you can be good. But man, there are times in which, kaboom, the bomb goes off. And it's embarrassing. It's damaging. It's hurtful. It's not helpful. What about fixing that? Well, you've tried. I'm not telling you to try harder. I'm telling you to seek God. Say, I need to put something out of my life to prepare myself. And we'll talk about how fasting prepares us. In fasting, we recognize how dependent, weak, and powerless we are. There are some things that you will never be able to repair on your own, period. When you fast, you recognize how weak you really are, right? How many of us get crabby or hangry, right? Is that the word? You think you're so stable, don't you? Level-headed. All right, miss a meal or two or 12. All right, come on, let's be honest. In those times, you realize how weak you really are. I love you. You're strong, but you are weaker than you think. Let's just be honest. And so it's a reminder of saying that I can't do this. I am weak, and we realize, God, I need your help in those moments when you feel some physical pain. It's a reminder of saying, God, I can't do this. I am dependent. I'm weak. And in humility, we come and we understand this. So fasting can have a powerful effect of recognizing how weak and powerless we are. It is actually a fantastic spiritual discipline of humility and preparation. God, I'm seeking your presence. God, there's a tear here, and I'm trying to repair it. And it's gotten worse. And I try again, it's gotten worse. I try again, it's gotten worse. Right? Not it. So Jesus isn't stupid. Fasting is preparing for a repair. I want you to think about doing this. Actually, I want you to do it. Pray about it. Okay, last point. So it's seeking the presence of God, being in his presence, the reason to fast, be rewarded by him. Second, for repairing something that's been torn. Third, it's preparation for something new. He goes on, verse 22. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Okay, wine was a very common drink. Back then they had it fermented. They could keep it. This is what they did. They had goat skin stomachs were typically used for holding wine. It got brittle over time. You don't put new wine into something that's brittle because wine ferments. And if it isn't able to expand, it's going to be ruined, both the wineskin and the wine. So Jesus used that illustration and says, hey, no one puts new wine in an old wineskin. If he does, the wine will burst the skins. And the wine is destroyed, and so are the skins. But new wine is for fresh wineskins. Okay, that's the illustration. What's the point? Okay, if you want to be receiving something new, you feel stuck or you feel empty or you feel spent and there is nothing there, right? If you've ever felt that way, in order to receive something new, what does that look like? It could be a new understanding, it could be a new outlook, it could be a new opportunity, it could be a new whatever, something that is next. You have to be prepared to receive it, because if you're not, you'll be destroyed. And God in his mercy will withhold something new and good for you, because if he gave it to you in your present state, it would destroy you. It will be destroyed, the new wine, and so are you. So God in his goodness, if you're not ready, doesn't give you something that will benefit you, because if you're not ready, the end result will be bad. This makes sense. Come on. So fasting prepares us. It helps us with our pride. It helps us with our self-righteousness. It helps us understanding, thinking how great we are. And so you say, you know what? God, I am looking for something new. I'm looking for the next. I want what is desirous of you to pour into my life. Okay, I'm using some illustrations here. I can't define what that is. Again, that is repairing perhaps some anger or some relationships or some whatever is going on. Okay, we understood that. But now this is something good. God, I'm looking for something more, something new. And God says, okay, but in order for you to handle this, you have to prepare yourself. Well, how do you prepare yourself? You become less so that he can become more. Makes sense. I think some of us, including myself, I'm not trying to say you, okay, including me, okay, just get to a certain point and just get stuck. Why? Because we're not ready for what's next. Why? Because we haven't prepared ourselves. Why? Because we don't want to discipline ourselves. So we think tacos is better than what God has for us next. Again, I like tacos. I'm going to conclude. I want you to think about this stuff, right? Most of us don't consider fasting, or we only do it in dire straits. And most of us don't get to that point, or we want someone else to fix it, or we want God to do something, but we do nothing. Now, this isn't a leverage to try to manipulate God. This is a tool in which we are declaring, God, that I want your reward. I want you more than any of this. And so it prepares us for a repair or for a new wine, so to speak. And I don't know about you, but there are things in my life that I'm desperate for God to repair. And I don't know about you, but there's places where I feel stuck that I want to go on. I don't know about you, but for me, there are times in which I feel alone in the room, right? When I'm praying or when I'm reading, okay? Being honest. So I want to encourage you to put this into practice. What does this look like for you? I don't know, right? Could be a day. It could be a meal. It could be 3 days. It could be a week. It could be longer. I don't know. I don't know. You know. Ask God. God wants good for you. And again, you have to understand, he sees things from an eternal perspective. Sometimes we think what we think is good is not necessarily good in eternity. James 4:7, I'm going to end with this. Okay? Humble yourselves before the Lord. He will exalt you. So it's a time of humbling. Right? Humbling. Humbling. My flesh doesn't like humble. You kidding me? I want to be strong. I want to be proud. I want to be together. I don't want to be humble. I don't like that. But my spirit says, I must become less and he must become greater. God, I need you more than anything. And God, there's things in my life that are bigger than me that I can't repair, nor there are opportunities or things that I want that I can't get. And so, God, I am looking to you. God, I am humbling myself. God, I'm seeking you. And if you do that, there will be presence. There will be reward. There will be repairing. And there will be new things that God pours in. So you see why I was convicted by studying this? And encouraged to employ this? So I encourage you to do it. Right? Again, not as a religious obligation, but as an internal desire. Right? Are you hearing me? God, I'm desperate for you. Do this work in me and around me. I want to encourage you in this. Right? So, Father, here we are, God, at the end of this important teaching. Whereas, Jesus, you always point us to the real purpose of our religious devotion and expression. Jesus, you know everything about us. And God, as we focus in on your teaching about this practice, God, I ask, as we employ this tool, God, that there would be a greater sense of your presence in our life. That there would be repairs that are happening and the tearing of the fabric of our life, God, that only you can do. And God, I can't wait to see that. And God, I know that what you give is good, Lord. The new things you want to pour in. So God, I pray for myself and this congregation here, God, for us. We would really think about this. And you would help us in this. And we would take you for your word and walk in it. May you be glorified in all things. We trust you. We know you lead us well, even though temporarily it could be uncomfortable and painful. But in reality, it is so beneficial. God, help us to be people who look to the things eternal, desire the things eternal, way far greater than anything here. In Jesus' name we pray.